Hello and welcome. This is Patty Azzarello, and this is a webinar I'm really excited to share with you on this topic of managing your boss, because so much of my work is about helping people feel like they have more control over what is happening to them in their career. And this is such a vital component of that I'm looking forward to sharing some ideas of things you can do to drive the rapport with your boss, to have a benefit in your career and have some less stress while you're at it. So before jumping in, for those of you who are new to my work, hello, I'm Patty Azzarello, and just a little bit about myself. I started my career at the bottom, like everyone does, actually, in engineering and computer science, and ultimately worked my way up through the ranks to become a Silicon Valley CEO. I've been a business executive for quite a long time. I'm an author and a speaker, and today I have my own company, Azzarello Group, where I advise companies and executives on strategy and leadership. But one thing I want to share with you is that through all of that, through my whole career, I have always had a real passion for helping others in their careers. And when I look back at my career and I look at the business success that I created, although I'm proud of those things, that's not what I carry with me today. What I carry with me today is the fact that I was able to help people change their life and move their own careers forward. And that just really means a lot to me. And that's why I do these webinars. And that's why I have my executive mentoring group program. These webinars are among the resources in my executive mentoring group. And members of the group get access to lots of other stuff to put these ideas that we're going to talk about in this webinar into action to get their own career breakthrough. And so the topic this month is managing your boss. And starting today, there will be a new executive playbook for managing your boss that has practical action steps, templates, worksheets, and scripts to help you optimize your conversations and your success. So if you are a member and you're listening into this webinar, this will be in your library. If you are not a member, you can get this playbook on managing your boss for free. And I'll tell you how you can access this playbook later for free. So I always like to start with some context and put the topic into the success model that I describe in my book, Rise, of do better, look better, and connect better. And this is also the framework in my executive mentoring group. Every career you need to be doing some of all three of these things. So do better is about making sure that you are being as effective as possible with your hard work and that you are adding value and having more business impact as opposed to just working hard. Look better is about how you are perceived. It's about building your credibility and positive visibility. And connect better is about building a network of support for your career and your work. And so I've put this topic of managing your boss in the connect better category because the action steps associated with managing your boss are ones of connecting and creating a better relationship with your boss. But once you do that, you're also going to get a payoff in the do better and look better categories, because if you are managing your boss, you are going to have a much more clear roadmap for your work and your career and for the impact you're making. And another result is that your credibility and positive visibility will increase. And we're going to be talking about some of those things specifically today and how to do that. So we're going to talk about how to proactively manage your relationship with your boss through driving the right conversations. And there's 4 categories here. First and foremost, building trust and confidence. Second, we're going to talk about managing your performance review and your career development plan. Third is about negotiating pay and promotions. And then fourth is about getting your manager to work for you. I will say that in this webinar, I'm not specifically addressing bad bosses. There's a whole nother category of conversations that we have to have if you have a narcissistic psychopath bully boss. And that's not what I'm addressing in this webinar. What I'm addressing in this webinar is if you have a boss that is good or neutral or maybe a little bit on the negative and challenging side, these techniques will be really useful. So let me jump in here. So the first topic, building trust and confidence with your boss. So just one of the things that I'd like you to take away from this idea is that a lot of times we are always thinking about what we need to give our boss, what we need to deliver. We have our performance objectives and things our boss asks us for, and it feels like a very one-way direction that has some built-in stress into it. So I'd like you to just, while we're talking today, step back and think about it more as a rapport of equals, and think about this as a relationship, and understand how much your career depends on your rapport and your relationship with your boss, and particularly that your boss trusts you and sees you as a credible person, because people with high credibility have an advantage. For example, you can get more resources with less debate, more time to execute instead of just reviewing progress over and over again and answering lots of questions over and over again. You get more access to the organization above if your boss sees you as highly credible. You get more ability to choose people, priorities, tasks, without a lot of defense or constant justification of your decisions. And then finally, if you have high credibility, it puts you in a position to be seen as a high performer who is deserving of bigger opportunities and compensation. So in terms of improving your credibility with your boss, one of the things I get a lot of questions on is one-on-one meetings. And how do I really optimize what happens in my one-on-one meetings so they're the most productive and so that I'm making a good impression? And one of the things that's sort of just the baseline here is ask. Ask your boss what they value in one-on-one meetings, and really understand how your boss likes to communicate, and have a conversation and simply say, you know, I'd like to make sure these one-on-one meetings are as productive as possible for both of us. So can we talk about what is the style, the frequency, the form, the content that's going to work the best for us? And you can create this structure together and get some buy-in for it. And I know some bosses are kind of crazy and disorganized, and other bosses are really open to this sort of thing. If you've got a boss that's crazy and disorganized, I recommend you just do something. You create a structure for yourself. You can ask for feedback on it, but then consistently use a particular approach for your meetings with your boss. That's something that you feel like you have control over. Another way to build credibility with your boss is to create transparency. The people that used to work in my organizations that I really attributed a lot of credibility to were the ones that never made me worry. And one of the reasons I didn't worry was they would always forecast problems, and they would always give me clear, brief, summarized proposals and business cases that made me feel like, I know you've got this. where people who didn't communicate effectively and would take, 50 slides in an hour to tell me anything and tried to bury the problems, those were the ones that I worried about. And one of the best practices that I've adopted over the years to have this conversation with my boss is simply a dashboard with a red, yellow, green status on what my projects were, what my boss was working on. Just giving them an insight of how it's going that's easy for them to consume is something that builds a lot of trust and credibility. And there is another executive playbook on mastering executive communications. And there's a lot of really useful stuff in there about how to prepare and organize your communications so they land well with executives. And it's very appropriate to use those techniques in preparing communications with your boss. So a couple of other things in terms of improving your credibility by improving your one-on-one meetings is not only understand how your boss likes to communicate, but understand what your boss gets hung up on. Because it's not a guarantee that you and your boss share the same personality type and think the same way. So understanding what your boss gets hung up on and what's going to derail the conversation can be really useful. So a couple things that are very common difficulties in conversations with bosses is if one person is a big picture person and the other person is a detail person. If your boss says, make it so, and you start talking about all of the detailed things you're going to need to take care of to enable your ability to make it so, that's going to be a big miss with your boss. What you need to do with a big picture boss is say, okay, I've got it. And then you go back and you organize all of your detail and you come back with more of a big picture summary. If you're the big picture person and your boss is into detail, you need to come up with a way to create the right level of conversation. So one of the things when I see people struggling with a boss that is more into detail than they should be is when the boss says, I need you to tell me about this very, very deep technical detail about what's going on, and you don't know the answer to that. The best way to confront that is you probably can guess as to what might motivate that question. So you could say, I share your concern about that, and that's really something that's at the heart of the performance of our service at our top 50 customers. So what is your concern as it relates to our top 50 customers? And you hook onto the detail, but then you raise the level of the conversation to something that is more reasonable to talk about. That's an example of a strategy of understanding what your boss gets hung up on and having a strategy to deal with it. Another one is like emotion and picture versus numbers. And I had a boss once that was so hung up on numbers that I could never talk to him about anything except numbers. And he would comb through any presentation I had, and as soon as he got to the first number, he didn't care about anything. As soon as he got to the first number, he would start drilling in on the numbers. And if there were, in the entire presentation, one 2x2 matrix with 4 numbers in it, we would spend the whole time talking about those 4 numbers. And so my strategy with him was, don't show him any numbers. If I needed to get buy-in on something, if I needed to get him to approve or support something, and there was an important story, I just made sure there were no numbers in my presentation, and I would get to the very end and, do it as briefly as possible. So think maybe 10, 15 minutes, not an hour, but I would get to the end of what I needed to say. And then once we locked in on that, I would bring in the numbers. So just understand the, big picture detail, emotion, numbers, structure, conversational, and you be prepared to guide the conversation to avoid hazards. So there are a couple of more ideas in the playbook about your one-on-one meetings and your one-on-one relationship with your boss that I don't have time to cover fully today. And that is the idea of giving your boss things that make him or her look good and how to do that. And then this concept of being known as someone that takes weight away, not being known as someone that adds weight. So again, there's a deeper dive in the executive playbook if you want more information on one-on-one meetings with your boss. Another aspect of credibility with your boss is, I think it's really super important to make the assumption that your boss doesn't understand your job. Your boss might have understood your job the day you were hired, but after 5 minutes goes by, you can be pretty sure that your boss does not really understand your job. And the hazard of this is that if you do a great job, it's often invisible. So if you're a program manager and you do a fantastic job managing all the balls that are in the air and being aware of risks and avoiding them and solving problems quickly before they turn into big problems, and you are just doing a fantastic job, what everybody else sees is nothing. Smooth sailing is not so interesting. Where you may have a peer in a similar role who, there's a crisis one after another, and then everybody notices the crisis, and then they jump in and heroically save the day and fix the crisis, and they get a lot of recognition for solving the kinds of crises that you have been doing an excellent job avoiding and managing before they turned into crises. So it's important to understand that when you're doing a great job, sometimes it's often invisible. And what you need to do is create context. Whenever you give status updates or ask for support, don't have that conversation in a like singular moment, singular thing. Always try to put it in the context of your whole workload, of your whole project or program. And one of the things I like to do here is to create a flowchart, to make your process visible by actually creating a flowchart of what your team does or what you do, so you can highlight the invisible. And what you might put on this flowchart are, blocks of where you get inputs from. What are the major functions that you manage? What are the risks that you avoid? What are the trade-offs that you make? Who are all the stakeholders that this work gets delivered to? What are the dependencies you're managing? If you can create a visual flowchart, what that ends up showing is that you're managing a really big job with lots of complexity, even when the external observation is nothing's happening because you're managing it so well. So some of the ideas to include when you're thinking about creating a flowchart for your job are the inputs, the desired outcomes and results, major process steps, dependencies, costs, risks, timelines, cross-functional agreements, quality considerations, outputs, communications. There's all these kinds of ideas. And in the executive playbook, there are a couple examples of a flowchart of a job to give you an idea of how to create that. But then you have the opportunity, when you talk to your boss and your boss asks you about one sliver of one little thing, you can pull out the flowchart and say, here's where that fits. And I'm happy to address that, but that's going to have ripple effects back to these stakeholders, and we're going to have to modify the requirements at these input levels, and I'm fine with that. but when you're having a conversation, your boss is not able to just isolate on one small thing and ignore the whole context of everything else that you're working on. I have found this to be a really useful tool in terms of communicating. So those of you that follow my work have probably seen this timeline before, and it's one of my very, very favorite things. And this is another way to build credibility, is to take your project or program and fit it all on one page and put the major milestones on it and put the major initiatives on it and have a red dot that says you are here and show the dot moving as you make progress. This is such an amazing tool to build credibility, not only with your boss, but with your team, with your stakeholders, because it shows such consistency that you are on it, you're managing it, you're not all over the place, you're not changing course, you are implementing this program. And every week or month you pull this out and the red dot moves a little further and everybody sees, wow, you're still on that, we trust you. So I really like this timeline as a communication tool. The second thing I want to talk about in terms of conversations with your boss is managing your own performance evaluation, managing your own annual review. And I think it's so important to make sure that you have a review at least once a year. If you have the kind of boss that's willing to give you feedback quarterly, hooray, that's a great thing. But I think it's so important to make sure you have a review at least once a year. And if necessary, write it yourself. And if your boss isn't giving you feedback, you go out and get feedback from others. How am I doing? I completed this project. What did you think? What was it like to work with me? It's not impossible. And I will tell you that for my corporate career, I did my own performance review 17 times. For 17 years, I had a boss, scattered throughout my career. I had bosses that didn't care about this and didn't invest in this process. And I made sure to always make sure that at least once a year, there was a record of what I said I was going to do, what I did, and there was some feedback about it. Because let's face it, we work in crazy days where there are so many reorganizations and bosses coming and going that at the very least, you have your own record that you control. And if you get 3 new bosses in 4 years, you at least have that record and you can refer to it for your own sake and you can use it to share your performance with your new boss. It's also really important to get feedback and agreement on based on your results, based on what you have contributed. What does the company think of that? What does your boss and the company think of it? What does this level of achievement and business value mean? Because you never want to get surprised. You never want to get disconnected where you think you've done a great job and you've delivered a ton of value and your boss and the company are like, yeah, whatever. That's sure you did fine, but that's not that important. So it's up to you to know both how your work is valued and how your role is valued. And you know this because you ask. So if you are the top, highest achieving customer support manager in a legacy product line that the business doesn't care about, your work is valued, but your role is not necessarily. And you need to know this, and you should never, ever be surprised about this. Another aspect of sort of the annual review, the annual performance plan, is this idea of your development plan. And it's really important to manage your own development. Don't wait for your boss to tap you on the shoulder and give you development opportunities. Don't just work hard and wait to be discovered. And just remember that in your own career, nobody cares as much as you do. And if you have a great boss that really is on this and really cares, good for you, take advantage of that. but most of the time, your boss does not care about your development as much as you do. So for me, the crux of career development is to know what you want, know where you're going, and then while you are working, find work and volunteer for work in the role that you want before you get there. And that's what I refer to as the experience paradox. The experience paradox is you can't get the job without the experience, but you can get the experience without the job. And so career development isn't about reading stuff or going to conferences. It's about getting experience that's going to serve your next step, and understanding that if you want to advance, the experience you need to advance is not what's found in your current job. You need to do something more. And if you can figure out what that is and find a project and volunteer for it and get your boss's support for it, that's how you use the experience paradox to advance yourself. There's a lot more information about this in another playbook that is called Strategically Thinking About Your Career. And then the other thing that's in this playbook, in the Managing Your Boss playbook, is a template that I really, really like. That's a performance management conversation template where you and your boss can both answer a bunch of questions, and it will make sure you stay in alignment. It will make sure that there are no surprises, and it's actually a really, really good basis for a performance conversation. So I was really, once I came up with that template, I used it for years. And so I'm really pleased to have this playbook where I can share that template with you. The third thing is negotiating your compensation. And the key thought I want to share here is the conversation about pay is never about what you personally are worth. It's always about what the job is worth. And a lot of people, when, they're going for a big promotion and they're trying to negotiate their pay, they have this idea like, I'm not worth 50% more salary. Little old me, that seems crazy. How do I ask for a salary that high? It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with what the job is worth. And if that job is worth 50% more pay than you're getting now, and you can win that job, you deserve to be paid at the level that job is. And so if you disassociate what you are worth and your feeling of how much salary am I worth, and you focus on what the job is worth, and you can do a lot of research now on the internet, on Glassdoor, you can talk to peers in other companies, you can get a pretty good idea of what a job is worth, and then that's what you stay focused on. And then you plan a business outcome discussion. You don't start with, I want a raise. You start with, here's what I'll deliver in the coming year, and talk about why it's important, and guide this conversation toward what is that contribution worth? If I deliver these business outcomes, what is that contribution worth? And so when you're asking for more money, always connect compensation increases to increases in job value and business results. And I find that it is much, much easier to successfully negotiate for a raise at a point in the future versus I deserve more money today. And if you can have this conversation with your boss about, if I deliver these things 6 months from now or 1 year from now, do you agree that I will be operating at a higher level of value, and therefore my salary should be raised to recognize that? That's the right kind of conversation. And you have to ask. I promise you, the people who ask are the people who get more. Don't just sit back and think your hard work will be recognized and you're doing your boss, like your boss is going to appreciate the fact that you didn't bug them. That's not the way it works. The people who get the biggest raises, or the raises at all, are the ones who do this business negotiation. And just kind of a funny story from my own career. My career advanced very, very quickly. And what that means in a corporation is that I was always at the bottom of the pay curve. I was always at the dead bottom of the pay curve because I'd get a big promotion and I wouldn't get a raise right away. And I was just like hanging from my fingertips at the very, very bottom of the pay curve. And everyone who worked for me made way more money than I did. And I finally got into a very high level executive job. I was managing $1 billion software business in a corporation. And I was just sort of tired of being at the very bottom of the pay curve. So I had this negotiation with my boss. And I said, you know, here I am. I showed him the pay curve. Here I am. I'm not asking you to get me to the top, but could you get me to the bottom of the middle if I commit to deliver this much revenue growth, this much profit growth, solve these infrastructure problems, you know, retune the product portfolio? There was a whole list of things. And he said, yeah, if you do all that in a year, I will give you a 20% increase. And that was going to get me onto the curve instead of hanging off the bottom of the curve. So I was pleased with that negotiation. So a year went by. I did all of those things and more. And I had my performance conversation again. And so I had the list. I brought the data back. I said, here's what we agreed to. Here's what I did. Do you agree that my results met or even exceeded what we agreed to? And he said, yes, absolutely. Amazing job. Well done. And I said, great. And I said, so does that mean I'm getting my 20% raise now? And he looked at me and he said, no. And for a moment, I was ready to be angry, but then he smiled and he said, I'm giving you a 30% raise. And then he smiled again and he said, but I'm going to tell you, if you didn't ask, if you didn't follow up, if you didn't ask, you were going to get a 5% raise. And so I just share that story because it's a good example of what I'm suggesting in terms of setting a point in the future and getting an agreement, but also that you have to ask. And so the last point here is managing the details in the process. You manage the details in the process. No one else cares as much about your details. So remind your boss of agreements from last year and carry your history through management changes so you don't get dropped between the cracks during reorgs. The last idea I want to talk about is this idea of getting your manager to work for you. And this is something I think is super important because we all have an opportunity, and actually, I think it's a need if we want to feel a bit more in control of what's happening in our career, if we want to feel like we're more in control of how our career is integrating into our life, that you figure out what your job needs to give you. And your job may be a very happy place. It may be a very challenging place. But I think it's really important to step back and think, okay, if I'm going to do this job for another 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, what do I want? Like, what does this job need to give me? And ask your boss for help with some of those things. So we talked about the experience paradox. If your job needs to give you specific experience, go find it, go back to your boss and say, will you support me in this specific development project? Other things you can ask your boss for are introductions to mentors or network introductions. If you're a high performer, this is something your boss should be happy to do for you, but they might not think of it on their own. So if you're working on a particular project, you can go to your boss and say, do you know anyone who has done something similar in your network that I could go and I would love to get some new ideas about best practices so I can do the best job possible? And that's a really nice way to open doors to mentors and to their network. And another thing that I think is really important is to ask to go to the staff meeting your boss goes to. And don't just ask to go there, like, please take me to the meeting, but do some homework and figure out what's happening in those meetings, and then propose a reason. Or if you're creating a work product, a presentation, a proposal for that meeting, ask if you can go to the meeting and hear the questions, or even present some of it. Because this is not something bosses will do automatically, but very often if you ask in a productive way that makes sense, you can get this door open, and then that visibility is something that's really super useful to you in your career. There's a couple more ideas in the playbook that we don't have time to go into right now on things to ask your boss for. One of them is how important it is to connect your manager and your team. And you should be asking your boss to spend time with your team, and you should make sure that connection is strong. And in the playbook, I tell some stories and talk about how to do that and what the real value of that is. But don't keep that separate. Find a way to connect your manager and your team. And then there are some other ideas in the playbook about what to do if your boss is blocking you. If your boss is saying, nope, you can't come to the staff meeting, you can't talk to anybody, never talk to my boss, never talk to my peers, you're not allowed, you're only allowed to talk to me. There are some ideas in the playbook about how to overcome that. Because if that's the case, you really are blocked and your career really is blocked. So you need some strategies to get around that. So some things to take away from our conversation here is, number one, just take the lead. Just assume that this is part of your career, part of your job, is take the lead and proactively build trust and manage your relationship with your boss. Number two is to think about performance and value together, and you own and drive the discussions about the value of your role, your performance, and your pay. And it's always this business negotiation. And then number three is reach. Your boss should help you with reach. Your boss should help with network and positive visibility. If you're a high performer, ask. So my final thought here is, just as I started by saying, step back and take a look at this rapport with your boss as something that's more of a peer, an equal relationship than always in the hierarchy, and think about how you can create the strongest rapport and credibility. One of the takeaways that I always have on my mind about that is just make sure you're never surprised. Never be surprised about anything that happens to you in your career. And by taking more of a lead role in your rapport with your boss, you are going to be driving that alignment regularly, and you're going to be at much less risk of being surprised by something. So don't leave this relationship and therefore your career to chance, because no one cares as much as you do. No one cares as much as you do, and you do have an opportunity to manage it. So I mentioned that there was an executive playbook on this topic of managing your boss, and you can get that playbook for free. So let me tell you how that works. So in this playbook on managing your boss, you will get a system with tools for how to drive these conversations, the right conversations that we talked about: performance and pay recognition, more support for your career goals. And you also get outlines, templates, worksheets, action steps. The flow chart for describing your job is in there. The template, the conversation template for negotiating and discussing your performance is in there. So there's lots of stuff jammed into this playbook to help you put the ideas we talked about today into action in your own career. And these playbooks are part of my executive mentoring group. And so members get access to all the playbooks, and it really is about getting your breakthrough and getting the insights, tools, and support you need to get your career breakthrough. And there's a new executive playbook each month. So the way the program works is there's 12 monthly executive playbooks each year. The membership is $269 for the whole year. And there's a 30-day free trial. So if you want to sign up for the 30-day free trial, you will get the playbook on managing your boss and all of that stuff for free by signing up for a free trial, and you can cancel at any time. So just to give you a sense of some of the other things in the program, again, the program is organized around Do Better, Look Better, Connect Better model. And under Do Better, there are things like make more time, leading high-performing teams, and mastering executive communications. In Look Better, executive presence, stand out, get promoted, marketing and positioning yourself. In Connect Better, authentic networking, mentors and sponsorship, and influence and matrix management. And these are the playbooks that are already live. They're already in there. And if you sign up as an annual member, you get access to all of this stuff immediately. And then there's some, in terms of upcoming new topics, there's one on remote working strategies, personal brand tune-up, developing strategic habits, building trust and credibility, and one on stress, productivity, and happiness. So this playbook on managing your boss, the idea here is to go from a state of, I'm not always sure where I stand, to I feel more in control of my career. And I have a framework and specific conversation scripts and strategies to proactively manage what I need from my boss. And the way the playbook works is that you get the overall system to think about this, the insights, the framework, the action plan. And the specific tools you get is there's a streaming webinar that's a deeper dive than what we've done today. There's an audio version of the webinar that you can take and listen to at your convenience. And there's worksheets, templates, and scripts to help you actually personalize this to your own career. There's also in this month, the upcoming month of December, the live topic is managing your boss. And so if you join us now, you will get weekly reminders and specific tasks and goals and scheduling ideas to put these ideas into action. But you can also use all of these materials in a self-paced way. You don't have to follow along with the weekly reminders. All the stuff is there. You can use any playbook on your own schedule whenever you want. And then there's also support. There's a direct mentoring from me in 2 coaching hour calls each month, the Q&A, and then there's also a private Facebook group. So again, you can get this playbook for free if you want to start a free trial. That's a great thing to do. So if you're thinking this sounds good, but I've looked at programs like this and they're pretty generic and my situation is unique, I hear you. And that is absolutely, absolutely the case. And so that's why I have put coaching into this program. And I'm going to get back to Colette in a minute, but there are 2 coaching hour calls each month. There are 2 group coaching hour calls. And what's really interesting about this topic is that I mentioned that this particular webinar was not specifically about bad bosses, but I would say that nearly half of the questions that come up in the coaching hour calls are how to deal with bad bosses. Whether your bosses are non-communicative, or they're a bully, or they're too detail-oriented, or they're crisis-driven, or they're disorganized, or they're, stabbing you in the back, throwing the team under the bus. There's all kinds of stuff that comes out in these coaching hours with regard to bad bosses. But it's an opportunity for you to absolutely ask your own questions and get direct coaching from me on your questions. So I wanted to just share a couple of insights from members. I have Colette here and Vicky in this Connect Better category because they really got their breakthroughs by understanding that, as Colette says here, I thought all you had to do was put your head down and work hard. I was so wrong, right? So through this program, Colette got the tools and the confidence to start connecting with stakeholders in a different way that built her credibility and allowed her to have the right kinds of conversations to ultimately land her dream job. And I love this quote from Vicky here that is, "I'm no longer intimidated by the steps necessary for career development." That's such a big part of this for me, is that if I can give you extra confidence to do the things that are going to make the difference, that's something that just means so much to me. And I'm just thrilled when people give me that feedback, like, I can do this. I see what I need to do, and I have the confidence to do it. That's why I do this program. Carrie was another really fascinating story. And Carrie's story is specifically related to managing your boss, because she was doing an outstanding job doing event marketing. And this was at a period of time when events, people going to events, that market was declining very quickly. And through doing excellent work for 2 years, in her company, she got the event business to be growing. And she was in a meeting with her boss and the CEO looked at a spreadsheet of their results and said, "Oh, I was under the impression that the conference market was declining. I guess it's not. Look at our numbers." And he had no idea. The conference market was indeed declining, and it was the work of Carrie that got that business turned around so it was growing for them. And so she was able to use the techniques in webinars like this one, in managing your boss, in changing how she was perceived, and in a very positive way connect the dots for the company stakeholders that it was her work that got those results. And then she very quickly, as she says here, I got 2 pay raises and 2 promotions. And now she is the CEO of her own company called lovepublicspeaking.org. So again, you get the 12 monthly playbooks and you get the group coaching, and the cost is $269 for a whole year. And as I was pricing this, I looked at other programs that deliver kind of monthly content and support and those kinds of things. And almost all of them that I found were at least $350 per month. But I do this program because I really want to help. So at $269 a year, I find it's easy to ask your company to pay for it. And even if your company won't pay for it, it's an amount that a lot of people invest on their own. And probably it's about half and half. If I look at my membership, about half the people pay for it themselves and the other half get it from their company. And again, there is the free 30-day trial if you want to get the playbook on managing your boss. Membership also includes a bonus class on a super important topic of ruthless priorities, because you can't advance your career if you're just overwhelmed and too busy all the time. So that's a really fundamental part of building your career, is making sure that you are managing your time in a way that you are focused on the things that add the most value. So all that being said, here is how you get the Managing Your Boss playbook for free. If you go to execmentorgroup.com, you will be able to sign up either for the free trial, or you can join as an annual member and you get absolutely everything. And what you'll see at execmentorgroup.com, these are your choices. The free trial also comes with 2 bonus playbooks on mastering executive communications and executive presence. And then month by month, your library will build up if you stay on as a monthly member. But if you just get the free trial, that means you get 3 playbooks Managing Your Boss, Executive Presence, and Executive Communication. The annual program is a better deal, and you get all the playbooks and immediate access to everything. You get the bonus class on Ruthless Priorities, and you get membership to the Facebook community, and you get a second group coaching call with me each month. So that's how the program works. And just one last note from Ben is, I just won't spend a lot of time here, but the quote, the part at the bottom, most importantly, in a way that maintained my sanity, because so many of us struggle with just being so busy. And Ben really took this Ruthless Priorities idea and ran with it. And he was able to focus on the highest value things and satisfy the key stakeholders without losing his sanity. So again, if you'd like to join us, if you'd like to get the playbook on managing your boss, simply go to execmentorgroup.com and you can start your free trial and get the playbook. So with that, I will close the presenting part of this webinar. And let me just do a time check here. We've got a few minutes till the top of the hour, about 10 minutes, and I am happy to take questions about anything. So hang on and let me just adjust the phone lines here. Go ahead.
Hi, Patty. Thanks very much for this webinar. It's very timely with the end of the year reviews coming about. Yep. So thank you for that. But my question is really around, do you see this playing out any differently if it was a government entity or a not-for-profit organization on how you negotiate with your boss?
Yeah, I think so. The thing about those situations is there's sort of this feeling that there's less money to go around, and that the opportunity to work in this important work should be its own reward, right? You've got you've got kind of those attitudes hanging there. So I think if you acknowledge those attitudes, you can still have a conversation. You might not have it as focused on business results and pay raises, but have it focused on the business results, and then have more of a conversation with your boss about what can you expect. So if I continue to work at this level, what can I expect pay-wise? If I deliver more, what can I expect pay-wise? And if your boss is just saying nothing, you joined and it's this pay grade for the rest of your life, that may actually be true in a nonprofit or in a government entity. So I think there is some room for that negotiation, but it is more difficult. And if you learn that there is absolutely no room, then I think if that's something that's important to you, consider a different organization, maybe try to go for a bigger role at a similar nonprofit or government, or go into a commercial situation. But I think the techniques are valid if you appreciate the context in terms of how you have the conversation.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Lots of questions today. Go ahead.
Hi, Patty. This is Nick, and I wanted to ask you, what mechanisms or what creative ways have you found to broaden the vision of your boss in order to some of the things you feel the company needs to be accomplishing? And when you talked about getting the manager to work for you, I would like to more or less try to enlighten him about that I think we're only doing less than what we should be as a corporation, and yet I know he has people above him who may not concur with what I think or with what he may buy into what I think also, hopefully. But any thoughts along those lines?
Yeah, it's always tricky when you are more strategic than your upper management. So the best way to do this is to when you're talking to upper management, is to start the conversation with what they do care about, right? So if they only care about tactical performance and keeping the trains running and turning the crank and delivering the revenue and profit that they're delivering now, and you see bigger opportunities, what you need to do is start your conversation where they are and talk about maybe the fact that we've got a good thing going here. However, there's stuff on the horizon that is going to change that. And it's not going to stay even. It's going to go down. And we need to put some things in place to counteract that. Because if you just start with a big strategy, they're like, we don't care about that, we're fine. But if you start with what they currently are thinking about and working on, then there's an opportunity to hook it to your thing. And so the playbook actually that I mentioned on mastering executive communications has some additional ideas about how to propose and convince your management to support the things that you're looking to do.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Okay. So I've got chat from Melissa and Sheila. Question on pay negotiation. What if the company would always find lame excuses to grant specific pay raises or support with career progression? It's not part of company policy. You need to prove yourself, but they have no way to measure your work and the value of you and your team's work. One of the things that I have done in this situation is, again, keep that constant record of my own performance and keep a constant record of the value of my own performance, and then have the conversation with my boss that says, I understand in this environment, this is not easy to get pay raises and promotions, but if you were in my shoes, how much longer would you continue to overperform without getting any acknowledgement and compensation from the company? I find that's the best way to change the nature of that conversation. Another question here. I created statuses and communicated what was done, but the perception of the role when I came into it, and that perception probably wasn't going to change easily as there was little value. So status reports either weren't read or people's eyes glazed over. So I think the issue here is that status is not the most compelling thing that you can communicate, right? Status is something that is easy to ignore. What you need to do is find the stories within that status. And if you have status on 10 things, maybe there's 2 good stories. Maybe there's something that created a real difference for a customer, or created a real difference on an internal process. If you can start communicating compelling stories, that's going to get you a lot further than simply talking about status. And once again, I'll refer you to that playbook on executive communications, because there's a lot of information in there about how to make your communications more relevant and exciting for your stakeholders. All right. I guess we will close it there. We are at the top of the hour, and thank you all very much for joining us today. Again, if you're interested in exploring the program, go to execmentorgroup.com, and you'll be able to explore all the playbooks there and get all of the options. And again, if you'd like to start a free trial, you will get the Managing Your Boss playbook. And I promise you, you can cancel at any time. This is not a goal to trick you into a subscription. I would love to get this playbook into your hands if you're interested in it. And if you have any trouble canceling yourself online, just send us an email and we will make sure that we work it out. It's a program I'm really excited about, and I would love it if you wanted to join us, and I would be honored to serve as your mentor while you are a member. So with that, I'll close out, and thank you all again, and we'll talk to you next time. Have a great day.